Allah, as I look to need dazzled am I, on you the Lord.
الله الذي يهدي عن الله به جميعا.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة.
سيدنا محمد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم.
إن الحمد لله نؤمن به ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له. وأشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا محمد عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق الخاتم لما سبق ناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم. أما بعد. Alhamdulillah, very honored to be here at MCCP. MashaAllah, it's a community that I've learned a lot about. My name is Tariq al-Mccp, and I'm actually visiting you all from Philadelphia, but I grew up in Tennessee. And I'm here, it's not my first time to Portland. I've been here a few times, alhamdulillah. But I am very honored to be here, and you all are very blessed with this masjid, with a beautiful Imam Najib, and a beautiful community, mashallah. These past couple of years for Muslims in America have, to be honest, been very difficult on us as American Muslims. All of the numbers and all the polls show that Islamophobia is on the rise. Hate crimes against Muslims are on the rise. There are Muslim kids, in a recent study done by a Muslim organization that shows that 4 out of 10 kids, Muslim kids in America, report being bullied in school because of them being Muslim. 4 out of 10 have been bullied within the last year because of them being a Muslim in America. And sometimes, I think about a third of the time when that bullying takes place or insults take place, it is from a teacher in the school. And there's a lot of bad numbers out there. There was a recent study done by the New York Times where they examined media headlines about Islam and about Muslims. And what they showed in this New York Times study, you can Google this and read it for yourself, is that Islam and Muslims are being portrayed more negatively in the media than cancer and cocaine. That Islam in the media is portrayed more negatively in media headlines than both cancer and cocaine. So we're in tough times as a community, and our kids especially, even if they're not speaking to you about the insults they may be enduring, the Islamophobia, the hardships they may be enduring, especially if they're in a public school setting, for example, then they're experiencing it even if they're not talking to you about it. I have two very young siblings myself, and both have experienced hardships in their own public school. One person told my young brother in school that I can't be your friend anymore because my parents told me I can't befriend Muslims. My sister, who is the only girl wearing hijab in her public school, was told on her school bus that called a terrorist. So these things are impacting even myself, my own family, and my own siblings who are going through school even today. So I say that not to bring down the mood, but because it is really important that we reconnect to the life of the Prophet Muhammad when thinking about the tough times that we as a community are going through. Because Islamophobia is nothing new. It is something that our Prophet experienced in Mecca, his family experienced, his community, his companions. There were Muslim bans in Mecca. There was harassment and hate crimes in Mecca. There was betrayal in Mecca. There were people plotting against Muslims in Mecca. In America now, it is, I think within the last few years, $200 million has been spent by Islamophobic organizations to misportray and paint a negative picture of Islam and Muslims. It's a big industry. You can make a lot of money, especially as a woman, if you say that you were Muslim and you left Islam and you start writing books against Islam. You can actually make a lot of money doing that. So there's a big industry in Islamophobia, and it's so important that we as a community, especially our kids, reconnect to the life of the Prophet ﷺ and his character in these difficult times. One thing that stands out about the Prophet ﷺ, we always say he is rahmatan lil alameen, a mercy to all the worlds, right? And this is a common phrase, a common slogan, something we often hear repeated. But how was this practiced in action in the life of the Prophet ﷺ? And something that always stands out about him is that he was someone who responded to evil with good. Always. When someone treated him with poor character, he treated them with good character. When people were enemies and they had insulted him personally, he found a way to forgive them eventually when they came around. This was something that was a constant theme in the life of the Prophet. Even in this country, there's a beautiful quote that I love by Abraham Lincoln. And he actually said, nearly all men can stand hardships and adversity. But if you truly want to test a person's character, then give them hardship. How do they, I'm sorry, not that. Give them power. He said, if you truly want to test a man's character, give him power and see what he does when he has power. Because nearly all people can stand hardship. So, what are some of the instances where the Prophet ﷺ not only stood hardship, but was given power and showed mercy? We know in the most difficult time in his life, he went to Ta'if to try to bring Islam to Ta'if, where he was stoned, where they actually lined up children with stones to cast him out of the city until, and this is the most beloved human being in the sight of God, being pelted with stones by children to the point where his blood was dripping down his body, filling his blessed sandals. And when given, an angel visited him and said that we can crush this town of Ta'if between two mountains if you give us the green light and kill all these people, just destroy the town. What was his response? He said, no, I don't want to see these people destroyed. because maybe their children, maybe their grandchildren will enter Islam. Maybe from their offspring, people will become believers. Power given to him. What did he say when said, he said, if you put the sun in my right hand, the moon in my left hand, I will not abandon this mission. This is the nature of the Prophet ﷺ, given power, and even in the conquest of Mecca, much later, near the end of his life. Who was the largest enemy to the Prophet ﷺ? Was Abu Jahl, right? He was someone who personally ordered times for the Prophet ﷺ to be physically harmed. Go and put the insides of animals on his back as he's praying at the Kaaba. Have him attacked, have his family harassed. He was the Steve Bannon of Mecca, Abu Jahl, right? And when the Prophet ﷺ came to Mecca to embrace, for the reconquest of Mecca, some of the worst enemies of the Prophet ﷺ were running to the hills. They were afraid of a massive revenge upon Quraysh. One of those was the son of Abu Jahl, Ikrimah, the son of Abu Jahl. The Prophet ﷺ, when he heard this, he told him, tell him to come back. Tell Ikrimah not to run away. Ikrimah ibn Abu Jahl. And he came to him and said, you can also enter Islam. I'm not going to prevent you from becoming Muslim. And when he said his shahada, Ikrimah, the son of the arch enemy of the Prophet ﷺ, what did the Prophet ﷺ tell him? He said, I knew there was good in your father. The man who had been the mastermind of hurting the Prophet ﷺ, he said, I knew there was good in your father. Meaning you are the good of your father, right? Who just became Muslim. Forgiveness. Even when at the height of power, when he could have ordered Quraysh to be massacred at that moment, this was his response. Next, one of my favorite stories is of a man named Amr ibn al-As. Someone who is from Quraysh. I like to call this man, not the Steve Bannon, I've already used that term, right? I would say that Amr ibn al-As was almost like a Bill Clinton in Quraysh, right? A guy that could convince you of anything. Very charming, very persuasive, very political, very good as a diplomat, very persuasive, very conniving sometimes, right? But he was very persuasive. And when the Muslims escaped to go to Abyssinia, they sent, the enemies of Quraysh sent Amr ibn al-As to negotiate with Najashi, the Abyssinian king, right? And say, send these people back home. I have all these jewelry, I have all this leather for you. Please just send these runaways back to Mecca. And we know what happened in that story, right? He fought against Muslims at Badr. He fought against the Muslims at Uhud. He fought in the Battle of the Trench. In fact, at Uhud, he was best friends side by side with Khalid bin Walid against the Muslims. And he was part of the contingent of horses that came around to hurt and defeat the Muslims in that battle. So he was responsible for harassment, killing, harming Muslims, trying to slow down the message from spreading. He was a very bad guy. And what happens after the Battle of the Trench is that his best friend Khalid bin Walid finally comes to terms with what's going on and says, anything we're trying fails. It's pretty obvious that this man is being helped by God, that he's not a fake, that anything we try is bounced back and come back and backfired. So Khalid basically is indicating, I think I'm going to become Muslim. Amr says, no way I'm going to become Muslim. And he says, I'm going to actually move to Abyssinia and just wait on the sidelines and see what happens, because the Muslims were gaining a lot of strength. They may come back and reconquer Mecca. He knew that something may happen here. So he said, I'll just wait, go to Abyssinia. It's a land I know well. I know Najashi. He's my friend. I'll just wait and see what happens in these next few years. When he gets to Abyssinia, he's actually in a meeting with Najashi, the king of Abyssinia, Christian land, right? And he says, in that conversation, he says an insulting word regarding the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in that conversation. This is Amr ibn al-As. Najashi immediately responds in anger and says, why don't you, Amr ibn al-As, why don't you just stop? Stop all your plotting, stop all your negative, PR campaigns, stop your killing, stop all of this, because I am certain that this man, Muhammad, will be helped like Moses was helped against Pharaoh. I'm positive that he will be aided by God like Moses was helped against Pharaoh. So just give up. And Amr ibn al-As says that is the moment when he realized wherever he runs to, he's not going to escape Islam and Muslims, and he realized that this was a sign from God himself, that Allah had stopped any of his strategies and they backfired, and he decided to embrace Islam at that moment. That's when he said Iman entered his heart. And he takes his boat and he eventually goes to Medina, and on the way to Medina, who does he meet? Khalid bin Walid, who's on his way to Medina to become Muslim. And they both enter the room. Just imagine the scene of the greatest war general and the greatest politician, who everyone in Medina knows what they've done against them, entering now, probably being asked at the door, give up your swords, give up your weapons. And they enter in that room where the Prophet ﷺ is. And right when Amr ibn al-As says, when I entered the room to become Muslim, I could not even look at the Prophet ﷺ in his face. His head was down. He could not even look into the face of the Prophet ﷺ, not only out of awe, but often, probably out of shame for everything he's done. And before he put his hand in the hand of the Prophet ﷺ, after being 20 years an enemy of the Prophet ﷺ, Amr pulls his hand back and he asks the Prophet ﷺ a question. And he says, what about these past 20 years? Am I going to be forgiven for everything I've done? 13 assassination attempts against the Prophet ﷺ in his lifetime. 13. Like, imagine if someone just keyed your car 13 times or changed the password on your phone 13 times. They would be your life-sworn enemy. 13 assassination attempts against the Prophet ﷺ. Much of that probably had to do with plans that Amr ibn al-As made. So the Prophet ﷺ responds saying, don't you know that when you enter this faith, when you enter Islam, that all of your past is forgiven, everything you've done is forgiven? And what happens at that moment? He says the Shahada and enters Islam. So this is a miracle of this man, one of the greatest enemies of Islam, becoming Muslim. That is a miracle. But what's even amazing is that this happens at a time when the Prophet ﷺ has only 2 or 3 years left to live. He's near the end of his life. And we have multiple sahih hadiths, where of this one story where Amr ibn al-As goes to the Prophet ﷺ soon, maybe a year or so before he passes away, and he asks the Prophet ﷺ a question. In Arabic, he says, فَقُلْتُ أَيُّ النَّاسِ أَحَبُّ إِلَيْكَ. So the Prophet ﷺ had just told Amr ibn al-As that he wanted him to lead an army. And the Prophet ﷺ had treated this man, Amr ibn al-As, since he became Muslim, with such kindness, with smiling at him, forgiving him, as if he had forgotten everything this man had done to him. To the point where Amr ibn al-As boldly asked the Prophet ﷺ a question, asking him, can you tell me who you love more than anyone else on earth? Now imagine, this is like a Karl Rove, Bill Clinton, powerful man. You can imagine he's asking this while, popping his collar a little, and he's sure that the Prophet will say, I love you more than anyone else, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't have asked the question. He asked, tell me who you love more than anyone else. He asked the Prophet ﷺ. And the Prophet ﷺ, the most honest man that's ever lived, says, my wife, Aisha. He says, no. Among the men, who do you love the most? He says, her father, Abu Bakr. And he says, okay, then who? And then he goes, Umar. Then who? And then he keeps going on to these names until Amr says, in the hadith, Amr ibn al-As says, I wish I had never opened my mouth to ask that question, because he kept repeating other names and not my own name, right? And this is a miracle in and of itself, that this man, 20 years an enemy of the Prophet ﷺ, feels like the Prophet loves him more than anyone else because of how he treated the Prophet, how the Prophet treated him, how the Prophet forgave him, how he actually made him forget his past, his aggression, his animosity, to the point where this man thinks, and how is it today? It is a crime that we commit as Muslims, taking a lesson from this of how we as Muslims can forget about a convert to Islam. That we can give our hugs and give our takbirs when someone enters Islam, and then they're spending Eid alone. That is a crime that we will all be asked about. If a man who is an enemy of 20 years can feel like the Prophet loves him more than anyone else, how about the people who are willingly embracing Islam and we forget about them 5 minutes after they take the Shahada? There's a lot of lessons we can learn from this story. Later in his life, Amr ibn al-As, after the Prophet ﷺ passes away, he actually becomes governor of Egypt. Still very political guy, but a political Muslim guy, right? Became governor of Egypt, became a very wealthy man. And at the end of his life, he has a beautiful quote on his deathbed. Amr ibn al-As says, he says, before I entered Islam, the Prophet ﷺ was the most hated man to me. And if I had died at that moment, I would have surely gone to the hellfire. And after becoming Muslim, he was the most beloved person to me. And if you asked me to describe even how he looked, I couldn't tell you because I couldn't even look into his face directly out of awe of him. And he said, if I died right after becoming Muslim, I probably would have gone to paradise. Because he was forgiven, right? So he said, but now I've been given wealth, I've been given power, and I don't know where my fate will take me, if I'll be entering paradise or the hellfire. And that's the state of all of us, right? We don't know. And we've been given a lot here, especially in this country. And he continues to make dua. He actually says, "Oh Allah, I am not innocent, so forgive me. I am not strong, so help me. And if your mercy does not come to me, I will surely be of those destroyed." And he keeps making dua until he says, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah," and he passes away. Now this is a man, for anyone who becomes Muslim later in Africa, in Egypt, this is a man who brought Islam into Egypt, opened up the continent of Africa for Islam. He's a man who fought in battles and led battles to prevent the Muslim community from being wiped out in Sham, in the area of Palestine, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, that region. So any Muslim who has been impacted or come from Africa or from that other region, every time you come to Jummah, every time you say La ilaha illallah, every time you are making dhikr, or you do something of Islam, is a good deed on the scale of Amr ibn al-As, an enemy of the Prophet ﷺ of 20 years. This is the transformative impact of the Prophet ﷺ on people around him, even his enemies. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه غفور رحيم. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah, wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. So in these final 5 minutes, what I want to stress is that I grew up here in the United States. I was actually born in the US. My parents are both Egyptian, but I was born in the US and have lived here all my life. And unfortunately, the way as a kid, when I was learning about the Prophet ﷺ, it was as if, one scholar calls it, as if you are reading a resume. Some people learn the seerah like they're reading someone's resume. Bullet points that he did this and this year, and this and this year, and this and this year, like a list of accomplishments, right? And you cannot fall in love with someone because of their resume. You can't tell if a person's kind or good to their family, or how they treat the poor and the rich in the street, or someone they don't know, or children. how they treat animals, how they treat enemies from a resume. You can't know a person's persona from their resume. And it wasn't until much later in life that I attended a very beautiful class on the life of the Prophet ﷺ that transformed me personally in wanting to learn more about the Prophet ﷺ. And love of the Prophet ﷺ is something that completes our iman as Muslims. We know the Prophet ﷺ said that a person's iman is complete when they love him more than anyone else, even their own parents, their own family. A Bedouin man came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, and the Bedouins, by the way, coming from Tennessee, I can say this. The Bedouins of Mecca were like the hillbillies of the Arabs. They were like the rednecks. They would come in and be very blunt in asking the Prophet some questions that everyone else was usually embarrassed to ask. This man was no filter, straight up, asking the Prophet, tell me when the day of judgment is. When is the meta sa'a? When is the hour? And the Prophet says, what have you prepared for that? And the man, very honest, says, I haven't done any extra prayers. I haven't done any extra fasting. But I know one thing, that I love Allah and I love the Messenger of Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ responds to him in a way that even Anas, the close companion, said that the Prophet's response to this Bedouin gave us more hope than anything he ever said. Because the Prophet ﷺ said to this Bedouin man, a person on the day of judgment will be with the one they love. A person will be with the one they love. So love is tied to where we end up on the day of judgment. We want to be with the Prophet ﷺ on that day. We want him to be our lawyer in the courts of Allah on the day of judgment. We want that. We want him as our lawyer. We want him to intercede and help us in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on that day. That's very important. And it's a crime that sometimes we don't pass on the love of the Prophet ﷺ to even our own kids. Sometimes I give a khutbah and I ask the kids in that gathering, tell me how tall Steph Curry is. And sometimes the kids in the khutbah, they answer while I'm giving khutbah. They jump and they say, 6'3". Tell me Steph Curry's shoe size, and his wife's name, and his children's names, and when he was drafted into the NBA, and what his free throw percentage is, and all these things about Steph Curry, and they tell me the names of the Prophet's children. The Prophet's children. Tell me the children's names of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. Describe to me how he walked, and how he talked, and stories from his life. Just tell me the names of the mothers of the believers. Those hands don't go up anymore. And one of the descendants of Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu said that we used to teach our children Quran at the same level, the same amount as we taught them the life of the Prophet ﷺ. Because you can't just learn the Quran without learning about the walking Quran. The seerah brings color to the Quran. It makes it operational. It makes it something you can practice. When you learn how do the principles of the Quran work in our day-to-day lives. So I'm here for a reason. I'm not here for a fundraiser. I'm here to raise our goals and intentions, inshallah. Because this weekend, and I'll close with this, we have this program which I'm sure you guys have seen in the emails and in the flyers, and I think they're also being handed out here on the brothers and sisters side. This program, which starts tonight here at the MET building, is a program that is dedicated to studying a 400 hadith book on the persona and the personality of the Prophet ﷺ. 400 hadiths will be covered in the weekend. And if we live to be 80 years old, in America that's the average lifespan, about 79 point something years. Do the calculations. You will have 4,000 weekends in your life if you live to be 80. What we're asking for this community to do, inshallah, is to give one of those 4,000 weekends to falling in love with the Prophet ﷺ. Because this is a very transformative program. There's already over 250 people that are registered for this conference. Tonight is a free opening night, so there's no payment, no registration. Tonight what's happening is an introduction to the book. We have five guest speakers. And this is going to be a really moving program, inshallah. Starting at 7 p.m. tonight is the opening. and we will go through these 400 hadiths. The hadith I shared of Amr ibn al-As asking, who do you love the most, was one of those 400 hadiths. So we want to invite everyone to come. There's also a parallel children's program we're doing, because it's not just about the adults, but especially the kids. So kids between 5 to 10 years old, there's a weekend-long parallel seerah program for them. And tonight they can even be younger to attend that the children's program tonight as well. So I want to invite everyone to try to come out, inshallah, because we know what the Prophet ﷺ sacrificed for us. If we can give one weekend of our lives to him as a gift to the Prophet ﷺ, to learn about him, to fall in love with him, this is something that I've seen it transform people's lives. We have people from Utah, California, Washington State, Virginia. There's even a lot of people from out of town who have registered and are coming to this conference this weekend. And inshallah, tonight will be packed. I urge you to try to get there on time or even a little earlier, inshallah. But it will be a life-changing program. You can read about it in the flyer, inshallah. And even if the conference as a whole, someone can't afford it, there are scholarships available as well. We want to make sure no one is prevented from attending if they can't afford the cost. That's very important to us, and it's a prophetic thing that we believe in, that anyone can come even if they can't afford the cost, inshallah. There's people that have helped pay more to help those who can't pay the full price. So inshallah, we want to urge everyone to come, inshallah. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم ارحم المؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات. اللهم لا تجعل الدنيا